Well, welcome everyone. I think we're going to try to get started so we have enough time to answer questions. My name is Lori Prince. I serve as the Director of Parent and Family Engagement at Seattle University, and we're excited to have you with us tonight when we have some of what I consider the experts from the parent perspective on the Seattle U experience. 3 parents of Redhawks, 1 recently graduated and 2 still currently here. So I'm going to ask them to introduce themselves when we get rolling. I also want to just remind folks, this is an opportunity to kind of really hear from parents of our students. We don't have other offices here. We'll try to answer your questions as best we can, but hopefully you'll get a sense of how they and their students experience the university from their standpoint. We have some questions that we'll pose, and then you will see a Q&A option down on the bottom of the screen, and we invite you to ask questions there, and we will try to get to as much as we can to help you get a better sense of Seattle U as parents of potential Redhawks. So I think without further ado, we'll get rolling in terms of asking our panelists to share some information, introduce themselves. Craig, I'm going to ask you to start.
Okay. I'm Craig Wagnall. My wife and I have our oldest son is attending Seattle University. He is a sophomore right now, and he is studying kinesiology, sports medicine, and he is also running for the cross country and track teams there. And I think not that I need to be the one to answer, but there was a question as to whether or not this is being recorded, and it is. So for those of you that are asking about that, it is being recorded. However, we can't see any of your faces. The only faces that are appearing on here are just ours.
Great. Thanks, Craig. Cindy, would you introduce yourself, please?
Sure. My name is Cindy Chen, and my daughter Caitlin is a 3rd year at SU. They just changed the name of her major, but her major used to be public affairs with a minor in business management. So now I believe it's called nonprofit leadership management. She is our only child, so we did send her to Seattle from the Bay Area, but it's now we have discovered it's a nice and short flight, so she has her space and we're still able to see her.
And Dan.
Good afternoon, everybody, and welcome. I'm Dan James. My daughter Julia, I live in Portland, and my daughter Julia graduated in June with a degree in history and a minor in international affairs. She got a job at a law firm in Portland just before she graduated, and is working essentially as a law clerk. And then she took the LSAT on Friday and hopes to go to law school soon. She is living with us, but working all the time between working and studying. And so we'd like to see more of her than she sees of us. So it's actually a joy to have her home.
My son came home after he graduated as well for a short period, and it was kind of fun to have him back in the house, and then happy to have him venture on his own and
to be employed. That's also good.
Yes, employed for sure. Well, first question I'm going to pose out to you is, why did your student choose Seattle University? Any one of you can go. We'll take it from all of you for this one.
I'll go ahead and start. So Caitlin actually is the class of 2025. So she started SU in 2021. That was a pretty tough year to start any university given the COVID situation. Just a little background in that, we did a 3,800-mile drive and toured multiple universities in 10 days. And in the end, she picked SU because several things. One, she was looking for a intimate campus where she didn't feel overwhelmed, but she was very specific. She wanted this campus to be in a lively city location where she can have the nice coziness of a small campus, but access to the broader city atmosphere, as well as internship and potentially job opportunities afterwards. So I think her first thing was location was very important to her. The second thing was we were able to visit the campus in person, which was a huge thing back in 2021. And she just felt at home. She liked where it was. She loved the people she met with the ambassadors, and she just felt like it was the place for her. So, and that happened pretty instantaneously, even though SU was the last campus we visited on our 3,800-mile tour.
Wow, you could write a book probably about all these institutions you've seen.
Definitely, it was an interesting time.
Craig or Dan, I think this is one to hear from all of you if we could.
Sure. Well, I'll jump in and you know, so Parker was kind of an unusual situation in the sense that, you know, he was running pretty seriously all through high school, and you know, one of his big goals was to run D1 and to be recruited to do that. And so we were, you know, I say we, I mean, he was concentrating on, from even I think his junior year, at looking at different schools, primarily on the West Coast, but running schools where he could run for D1 running program. And he was checking out the coaches, he was checking out the runners. So he was in contact with, when we came up to visit SU, he knew the names of all the people that ran. and so they had been communicating via Strava, which is a running app. So I mean, he was very interested in Seattle University, you know, initially because of the running, and then also because of its location, because of, you know, many of the things that Cindy mentioned that her daughter was found attractive. The fact that it isn't an overwhelmingly huge school, that, you know, that, you know, we're from Hawaii, and there's a fairly good group of kids from Hawaii, and so he was able to talk to other friends or people from Hawaii that had gone to school here or were going to school, and got just, you know, wonderful reviews from them as well. So from our standpoint as parents, you know, we were going to be happy with whatever he decided, but we've really come to fall in love with Seattle University, and certainly it's very convenient direct flight from Honolulu, so that helps.
Great. I'll jump in. We're in Portland, and yet Julia had decided to look at, you know, small, rural, big rural, private, public, East Coast, West Coast, and narrowed her choices down eventually to the West Coast. And when she stepped foot on campus, she just said she knew in her gut that that was home. She ended up, she liked being, you know, a few hours away from Portland, but that ended up not being as important to her, I think, as just the fact that she also fell in love with Seattle, you know, being a Portland kid. She also, I would say, you know, fell into a community right away. She not only her community in Cambion, but she was in choir. She played lacrosse and was captain of the club lacrosse team. They play all over the Northwest. And so she knew that she wanted to play at a high level. And so it just fit. And that was, I think, confirmed right away, just in terms of the community that she stepped into, both students and staff. I think that it's a very sophisticated residence life program. You know, Lori mentioned, or Will mention, orientation. Really important for her to engage in those things. I think that helped her, you know, step in and be comfortable right away.
Great, thank you. One of the things I want to ask, you know, Dan, you talked about community and Campion, the residence halls. All of your students are from, you know, not a commutable distance. They all stayed on campus. Would you talk about that experience for your student, what that was like? A lot of students haven't even, you know, have probably not shared a room, but they share a room at the university. Kind of what was moving into college housing like?
Sure. Well, I can go, and then the others can. So yeah, we had been through this with an older child, so I would say it is a very different experience than when I went to college, and maybe with the other three there, it's very sophisticated. There was a lot of help. There were actually carts and people around to help, and it was a kind of a well-oiled machine. One of the things that we recognized is that the Residence Life organization was pretty intentional and worked pretty hard to help students match with each other. And Lori knows I have to say this eventually in the course of a call with you, and that is that from the very beginning, it was implied that there's all sorts of resources for Julia, but the most important thing was 5 words: let her figure it out. I think it's really important, for families to really give their children that grace, and to recognize that this is a big step, and there's tremendous support for them, both in the residence hall and throughout campus. But at the end of the day, they kind of have to do it. This is that first really big step. So if I were to offer any advice to parents who are sending a child to college for the first time, it would be those 5 words.
It's a tough one, but it's a critical
Yeah.
thing. Any other sharing about kind of that big transition to on-campus life?
Sure. So Caitlin was in Bellarmine her first year, and then Campion her second year. So it was actually really interesting. What she found most useful when she came into her first year was she was right away getting on the chat boards, trying to do the roommate match, and she actually met her roommate before they selected the actual room. So I think that really helped to have that conversation and meet people live. We actually ended up meeting her roommate and her family the summer before they moved in. So I think that took a little bit of that uncertainty out of the way. So I thought that was like a really nice support for them to actually be able to meet some of potential roommates before they stepped on campus. Unfortunately, her roommate had to withdraw because of a medical issue. So the campus housing did work with her to find her a different roommate. So there was some learning experience, right? Best laid plans, and then life happens. So that was actually, it wasn't a learning experience that she wanted, but she was able to get through it and understand the process and be able to actually meet some newer people when she had to move locations. But I think the dorm life experience was one of the best experiences for her in terms of learning, especially being an only child, never having to share anything. To be able to share a 180 square foot room with another person for 2 years was a really big deal. And they did. They had to learn to resolve their problems, sometimes with the help of their RA, who was really quite good in dealing with their peers and helping them talk through things. But I think having the 2 years residence life requirement is actually one of the best things about being on campus.
Great, thanks. Craig, anything to add?
Well, Parker is just finishing up his second year, and he's been on campus both years at different places. I think it's been a very positive experience all the way around. He's he's roomed with at one point he's rooming with another kid from Hawaii that he's known for a very long time, but not somebody he's ever lived with and such before. And he's had to learn, as both Cindy and Dan said, he had to learn to figure that out. And we as parents had to learn to keep our mouths shut and just let him figure it out. And but I think that's been a very positive part of the experience of gaining, of taking on the responsibility for being independent. And so that's been good. He has a very strict schedule because of his running and such. So, in some senses, that worked well for him. And so, even when I've come up and to see him or other things, he's got training in the morning, then he's going to class, then he's got a little bit of time to study, eat dinner, then he's He's got a long run, and then, so it's generally for during the week, he's pretty busy. So he's not doing as much in connection with the dormitory, what's going on there as he might otherwise do. But on weekends and such, he and his roommate will get together and do things with either with each other or with other groups from there. So that's good.
Great. We've got a question in the Q&A. I'm going to pop out for folks. I don't know what you can share, but someone's asking about parents meet the high cost of even after scholarships. Are there recommendations for types of loans for students or parents to take out? And, how much has tuition increased? Tuition will increase probably every year on every campus that we see. That is typically happening.
So I guess I can say, so Caitlin did get a scholarship. It did not cover the full tuition and living expenses. But to be honest, we were just grateful of getting the scholarship, and she knew this was the school she wanted to go to. So it really helped us in our decision. And thereafter, we didn't necessarily take out any loans, but just in terms of managing some of the finances, again, we try to make it a learning experience. We set her up on a monthly budget that she had to meet. And if she wanted extra, she was able to get some campus jobs. She was actually a freshman orientation leader, to get paid for doing something she wanted to do, I thought was great. Being on Seek and so forth. So I think there are a lot of opportunities, at least from the personal spending side, for students to be able to qualify and get on-campus jobs to help alleviate some of those type of costs.
There's information too with our student financial services folks and our Office of Student Persistence related to other kinds of scholarships that are not necessarily Seattle U based. There's a cadre of things from around the country that folks can apply for, and we have somebody in student persistence that can help students do that. Or as Cindy indicated, lots of students hold some sort of part-time job. Campus leadership positions are paid positions as well. Those kinds of things were not paid back in the day when I ran the orientation program, but I think it's great that students are able to be compensated for what they're giving back and learning as part of their leadership. So we would encourage you to reach out to our student financial services folks for more information on other scholarships or loans, or again, our students persistence. Gosh, I'm having trouble this afternoon. Folks can help students cull through some of that information. There are also a couple of other scholarships that become available to students in their junior and senior years. Some are academically related that we have that are campus sponsored. They wouldn't be something a student could apply for right now as an incoming student, but as they're a rising junior or senior, those are opportunities for more resources to come their way.
Lori, the other thing I'd add to that, besides obviously going and talking with, financial services there at the university and such, is that, at least in connection with the high school, there's usually a high school counselor that is assisting with some of this. There are a lot of, we're in Hawaii, so there are a lot of local Hawaii scholarships that are available that go unused every year, and oftentimes just because people didn't apply for them and didn't know about them. Sometimes they're based on the fact that, my child likes running, and there just happens to be a scholarship out there for running, or there's that runners can apply to, or there are scholarships if you're interested in arts, or and you're from Hawaii, or if you're a first-time student to ever study on the mainland in your family, or all of these kind of things, and they'll know and be able to sort of direct you towards some of those. So all of that is just money that's out there to be picked up, and I encourage you to look around a little bit on some of that. But coming out of college with a little bit of debt, not a ton of debt, but a little bit of debt, is not necessarily a bad thing, and is not something that you're investing in yourself. And so I think that isn't necessarily a bad thing to think about as well.
I'll jump in too. And there's Lori, I do see a number of questions in the chat, and I think I can, as a parent, I can at least touch on some of these. One, we had Julia also had some scholarships, but we had an expectation that she would have a job in the summertime, and that she wanted to have more spending money than I think we were providing. So she also figured out a way to get a job on campus and then later a job off campus that fit both her academic, pretty rigorous academic program, as well as lacrosse. Ironically, one of her jobs was to coach a club lacrosse team, and that she made connections while she was there. There was a question here from a first generation student. What happens if the thing that you thought when you started doesn't end up happening for you at the end? And I would say for both of my kids, but for Julia at Seattle U, part of the beauty of going to a small school where faculty are making a choice to be there because they want to teach means that your child will have a journey, and it may not be, it may end not where they thought they were starting. So, Julia changed her major, I think twice, and found one that really fit for her. So part of the education, part of the journey of being educated is that she'll figure out what her passion is. And I think that, she was well prepared to enter the job market. I find, I'll bet that the other parents here would agree, the most important thing is to communicate well, and I would say write well. And that's something that there was a really focus for her in her program at Seattle U, and that ended up having her be well placed to get a job. So and then finally, I saw a note about the meal plans. It is an adjustment for a child to go to the food service on campus after living at home. And there was a conversation that we had with Julia about what be comfortable with the offerings there, and they were vegetarian, vegan, fresh, organic, everything, but she's a little bit of a food snob, I'll just be honest. And so we had to sort of say, well, this is what you get, and from what we saw, it is really good and high quality. And so if you choose to spend your money by walking across the street to Whole Foods for a $15 salad, that's on you. That's not on us. And but so that's part of her figuring it out. She finally decided that was okay. Anyway, there you go.
Great, thanks. There are many questions about scholarships, and frankly, again, I'm going to ask folks to refer to our student financial services people, since they are the experts in that particular realm, and this is an opportunity to kind of hear from families. Of course, the question of safety has come up as we're an urban campus. If you would respond to parent concerns about safety on our campus and in Seattle.
So that was a concern for me as a mom living in the suburbs. So I think there was also a question about the dorms. So first of all, the dorms are on campus. I think Caitlin rolled out of bed and went to class, and she can get there in 5 minutes. I don't know what she looked like when she got there in 5 minutes, but she got there in 5 minutes. So I think being on campus is very, I think, easy and convenient. Safety wise, I think it's a bit of an adjustment, and we had to really talk to her about that. And I actually enrolled her in like a safety course before she left for campus, just because some of her activities did end late at night. So I think nothing has ever happened, and she was very careful. So if the drama practice ended at 10, always safety in numbers, as we told her. There were times where she did call the walk service to walk her from one end to the other. We were very adamant about that. And I think because we put safety as one of the topics, she went in understanding that would be something she really needs to handle and be very smart about. And since then, she hasn't really had any issues. She She lives off campus now technically in Yobi, so that's all of 2 blocks away from campus. But she keeps all of her good practices. So she will ask people to walk her to Yobi if it was midnight and she wasn't walking with her friends back home. But otherwise than that, I think that's been great. And just in terms of being in the dorms, she had an allergy attack her first year. It was kind of scary for us because her roommate was calling us, but as her roommate was calling us, public safety came in and made sure she was okay, and whether she had to go to the hospital or not. So there's a lot of actual support within the dorms too. If there were any safety concerns, public safety would come in and investigate the issue.
Great.
You
We
know,
do have a 24/7
tell
public
that-
safety staff, so.
yeah, I was gonna say, I've had the pleasure of serving for the last, well, not quite year yet, as one of the co-chairs of the Parent and Family Leadership Council. And in that role, one of our meetings, we had the campus safety, leaders there talking to us about what they do. And one of the things Cindy mentioned, which is wonderful, is, and they emphasize they love doing this, is that they'll walk you, back to your car, back to your dorm, back, wherever it is at night, at any time. And all you have to do is call them and they'll come. And it's not like you're putting them out. They want you to do it. They enjoy doing that. That's part of, that's part of the service that they actually enjoy doing and being a part of. So, that's there. We have a lot of families from Hawaii that express concern about safety because Hawaii is generally a relatively safe place. And they know, everybody here knows what areas are not safe or might not be safe at night. And so, and you don't know in Seattle and you're not going to be there. And I get that. I mean, I think all families share that concern. I will tell you that, on campus, one of the messages we got many, many times was, on campus is actually very safe. You have this image in your mind of your child, by themselves, hoodie on with their listening to music and walking home in the dark and somebody sneaking up behind them. And that, I mean, your child shouldn't be walking at night like that anyway. And yes, talk to them about that. But they are being told that also by the school, by campus safety, by others in their dorm, and the kids hang out and do stuff together. I mean, my son thinks he's invincible, but he still wouldn't do that alone and wouldn't walk off campus at night by himself. He goes with other friends and such. And so I tend to think that a lot of our fears get overblown in our own mind because part of it is that we're dealing with the situation that we're not right there to control like we have been for the last 18 years. So
We do spend a lot of time working with them on safety, their safety, our community's safety. It is a big deal for all of us. And those of us who work here too. I'm here late in the evening. I've used the public safety folks if I've needed to get from one part of campus to the other if it's late and dark. So they're very accommodating in terms of that. A question came up about the quarter system, right? Many schools are on semester systems, but we're on a quarter system. How was that adjustment for your students?
Well, I would say, and this gets to the heart of a couple of other things that I'm seeing in the questions. Organization is everything, especially if you are an active student. And I think that, all 3 of our children at Seattle U have been involved in other things besides just going to class. So organization is number 1, not getting behind really is number 2. And number 3, using the fact that you're at a small university where you do have access to your faculty and other academic support resources to communicate with your faculty. If you find yourself struggling or falling behind, or you get a cold and you miss class, but it's back to that, you having to take that initiative, your student having to take that initiative to go figure that out. There was another question here about changing majors. There is a terrific academic advising apparatus at Seattle U, but it really is up to your student to use that. And so I know that as Julia was thinking about changing a major, she was always sort of gaming out, okay, so does this still put me on the path to graduate in 4 years? If I'm going to do this, what would I need to take next semester, the semester after that? She had a tremendous amount of help with that, but she had to access that help. She had to walk through the door in order to do that. But all those resources are there.
Yeah, I think to second some of the things that Dan's mentioned. So the quarter system was actually a very difficult adjustment for Caitlin. 10 weeks, and then the 11th week, you're basically taking your finals. But I think because, so Caitlin has some learning challenges, so she already went in knowing that she can talk to the disabilities offices about some of her learning concerns. And then so she was very encouraged that there were a lot of resources. And I think one of the greatest things about her being at SU is that she felt absolutely no stigma to ask for those resources and to seek out those resources. So she can go into the Learning Center and look at what they have for tutoring. She can go to Writing Lab and work with the Writing Lab folks to get her essays, cleared up, or whatever the questions that she has. And as parents, we've been actually really impressed in terms of the fact that I think she had a freshman advisor her freshman year. She had a major advisor to go through all of her major classes and programs. So when she wanted to add a minor, then she went to talk to the business school to go add the minor. She had an advisor there. And I think there was a question in internships because of her public affairs major, she is required to have an actual internship before she graduates. So now she has an internship advisor to help her find those internships and make those connections. And she was able to get an internship for this quarter that's going to be extended through the summer. So as parents, we are hands off because she also has so many resources that she can reach out to, and that these resources, her first advisor told her about her second advisor, and so on and so forth. So she probably has, I don't know, more of advisors than I ever did in my 4 years of college.
They do have lots of folks. And Cindy, I really appreciate your comment about the no stigma for asking for help. What we try to tell students is the best students use all of their resources available to them. So there is no stigma. College is hard. Ask, ask, ask. Go to the tutoring sessions. Go to disability services for accommodation if that, if that's something that is going to be supportive of you and that we can do for you. But it's not like, oh, in high school, I only go for help when I'm having trouble. We really want students to maximize all of what they can get here to be the best student they can be. And so I'm glad that that's been the experience for Caitlin. We had a question about meal plans, college food, always an interesting thing. We do have a minimum required for students who live in the halls, but any insights from campus food or meal plans?
My son needed the largest meal plan.
On the opposite end, my daughter needed the smallest meal plan.
Okay.
That's what we did both years she took a small meal plan. And she's a bit of a picky eater. So she used her extra money from her job to buy more food. But I think what was good about it was that we were able to roll over, at least for fall and winter quarter, what she didn't use into spring. And at the end of the year, we were able to donate some of those dollars that she did not use into kind of the food pantry. So we felt like it was a good use of our money at the end of the year.
Julia had a very similar experience to Caitlin. She didn't use as much as she was given, and so we actually got her a smaller food plan, I think the next semester or the next year. But for her 2 years on campus, it ended up working well, and she eventually saw that there really was quality, and she could adjust the fact that she didn't, $15 salads get expensive, so she decided that was a good thing. And I've eaten there, and I find it to be high quality and diverse, with lots of options, fresh, etc.
Question in the chat, did your child or you have any surprises or challenging adjustments their first year at SU?
Hmm. Well, I'll jump in and say that, I think the surprise for me was that Parker was as ready to be independent as he was. I mean, I don't know if I was as ready for him to be that. And, I don't know whether I blame it on being, from Hawaii and we tend to coddle our kids here, but maybe more than most, but he was ready to go and I'm so impressed with how he stepped up to just basically take care of whatever comes up. So over spring break, he stayed on campus because they were training through the thing. He went to a movie and bit into a kernel of popcorn and cracked his tooth open. And we heard about it after he'd already gotten the dentist appointment, gotten over there and gotten it fixed on his own. And I thought, I didn't know you could do that. I didn't even know you knew how to use the phone as a phone. So it was, I think all the other surprises, the things that he's gone through that we've heard about, if you want to call them surprises, changes, I mean, getting used to things, they've all been really positive. Sometimes a challenge for him, but he looks back and it's made him even more independent and confident of his ability, and it was never anything that he couldn't handle.
Yeah, I think for Caitlin, because she had an unexpected switch of roommates her freshman year, I think that was actually a difficult time for her because she had just built her friend group and her roommate was her best friend, and then all of a sudden her roommate was no longer there. And I guess in some ways that was her surprise, right? She thought once I'm settled, that must be it. I don't have to keep working at finding myself or finding friends and so forth. So I think that was a bit of a surprise to her that life happens. But she was able to go through it. I think it's just a course of life, in that when one door closed, she was able to find new clubs and new people to hang out with. And I truly think that forced her to go out and look at whatever the 70 clubs they have on campus, the anime club, the Asian Pacific club, whatever they are, to really go and explore and find her group of people. And I think that builds both resilience as well as, I think, an openness that I think probably surprised her too. She kind of likes her things the way she likes them in a structured environment. And I think it was a surprise to her that she's probably a lot more flexible than she had first imagined.
And by the way, largest club on campus, Huionani, the Hawaii club, and you don't have to be from Hawaii to be on it.
Yeah, that's fantastic. I had watching Julia, Becky and I had very similar observations to what Cindy and Craig did. I remember the first time that Julia actually observed that her roommate was sort of cluttered, and she was talking about things that drove me crazy about her at home. And we just sort of laughed and said, wow, she's adulting, wow, she doesn't, and you just sort of see that unfold. There's also, I think, some of you who haven't lived in a residence hall setting, there's a certain intimacy that comes with living in a room with somebody or next door to somebody or on the same hall. And so you learn, the best of people, and you learn about things that you don't want to be like, right? And this is all sort of part of that community living experience that we felt was really an important part of her going away to college. And so, it ended up, she ended up, Cindy used the word resilient. That's one thing I think we would all want for our children, especially those that are going away to college. Great, offering grace to others, compassion, stepping in for people when they need your help, or conversely being willing to ask for help, as Lori said. And it hasn't really been stated here, but Seattle U is a Jesuit university, and what we found with Julia is shortly after she started, and with her first year and I think in her first semester, she kind of got her social justice button punched. She took a class that really inspired her, that kind of set her off on her direction. And some of that started happening in the residence halls too. So there was a great sort of combination of what was happening in the classroom for her and what she was seeing, you know, in the residence halls in that regard.
Great. I'm gonna ask you this question. From your perspective, does having small class sizes have any disadvantages? And this parent is worried that it might make students less competitive for the future.
I don't know. I have not seen a disadvantage. I think well, within the classroom, I think it's actually been a great advantage for Caitlin because she has been very comfortable approaching her professors. They actually know her name. As someone who came from a school of 35,000 students, that was unheard of for me. She always felt very comfortable approaching any of her professors. So I think that's been an advantage. You know, it's a small size, so when you have to work in groups, I suppose sometimes you don't always get as many choices as you had hoped for the people in your working group. But again, that's a fact of life, right? We don't get to choose our coworkers at work either. They just are. I think the only other thing she's experiencing a little bit is she's also in a small major. So she just has to be able to plan ahead with her advisors because not every class is offered every single quarter. So she has to make sure she's on track in order to take those classes in the appropriate quarters so she can move on to her next requirement. So I think that is one thing, depending on your major, you have to plan a little bit better with your advisor or just looking through what you need for your graduation requirements.
Yeah, we think of it as an advantage because you can't hide in a small class.
That's
You
what I
need
was
to
going to
come
say.
prepared.
You can't be anonymous. This is not the place to come if you want to be anonymous.
Right. Could you talk a bit about maybe student budgets? You know, Dan, you were sharing kind of the, you know, when they go off campus, but if they're living on campus, if they're on a meal plan, what kinds of other things should they be thinking about maybe needing some resources for? Lots of students have jobs to accommodate, you know, those extras. That's what we did with my son, that for the extra things he wanted, that was a good opportunity for him to learn that to live within some means, what he could earn.
Sure. For Julia, it ended up being, you know, her basic needs were met, but you do need additional things, whether it's for laundry or that inevitable thing that you need to buy at the bookstore that you need for a project. You know, I think that it really depends on the lifestyle that you want. And for us, we said, well, a lot of that, Julia, is on you. You know, certainly we will pay for your transportation home and other things, but you know, to the extent that you want to go out and have fun, we'd like you to earn that money. And she had the opportunity to do that. I think that back to your original question, Lori, your basic needs are largely met, but you still need money to just take care of some essentials. And again, laundry and supplies kind of came to mind for me.
I guess I'll jump in. You know, again, Parker is in kind of a unique situation for the most part. The money, the extra money, when he needs it, is usually for food. It's usually he's you know, they want to go out and eat at you know, and get burritos at whatever, you know, at 10 o'clock at night or whatever. It's usually things like that. Or everybody's going to go down Saturday after their workout. They're going to go down and see a movie, or they're, you know, so there are things like that. And because he's training on the team, it's not possible for him to get a separate part-time job and such. So we've told him, if you're competing and you're committing yourself and doing that, then, you know, we provide a budget for him, and then he's got to learn to live within that. So he can't come to us and say, well, I spent it all, I need more. And we have had that. We've had to sort of hold tight with it and say, well, you know, you have to find a way to make it work for another week and a half. And that was a good, you know, he didn't appreciate it, but I'll tell you, it didn't happen again, you know, and he's pretty careful with how he does that. And then he's going to work this summer before he has to go back up. So
The other thing that I think that is maybe obvious just because it's the way we all live is that, you know, Julia was on our cell phone plan and we paid for that too, right? So that was just another thing that families need to be aware of.
yeah, that's true. Yeah, we do the same.
We have a question about, can you describe how orientation assisted your children? Now, for two of you, your students came in kind of virtual worlds, and Dan, if you remember back, that was an in-person piece. If you can share about that, and then I can talk a little bit about what we have planned for this coming academic year.
Well, I'll just start by saying I remember orientation. Julia wanted to be where we were not. So that was, you know, part of it. This is my beginning of not wanting to see my parents, you know, right there with me all the time, as because we were very engaged parents growing up with her. She also, I think, began, you know, everybody begins to sort of assess themselves up, you know, assess others, you know, wow, do I want to be with those people? Do I like what they're saying? You know, and this is the opportunity for people to begin to form relationships or to learn a lot about this brand new place. So she came away, you know, one, being glad that she went, two, actually wanting to keep some of those things to herself and not want to answer 30 questions from us on the way home. And so we sort of saw that as kind of the beginning of her transition to college, and we sort of let her have her space in that regard. But it was one thing that, hands down, I'm so glad that she did the in-person. And so if there's any way to go there and actually do that, if there's any way for you to do that, I think it's really, really good. But you will still succeed if you can't. I think somebody's from Nepal, I saw, you know, that may not be possible. But if you can, it's a good thing.
So I think there's also, there's that summer orientation, and then they have the actual freshman orientation before school starts on campus. And Caitlin was actually, I think, the first class after COVID to be able to do that in person, which was really great because that's where I think the dorm also came together, because freshman move-in day is all in one day and everyone's, you know, I think there was like 3 p.m. Parents were supposed to leave the room and she literally kicked us out because she had to go somewhere else. Absolutely. So that was a great sign, made us actually feel really good. But I think the orientation, it's a bit of a whirlwind, right? Because you're trying to give a lot of information. But I think Caitlin, having been a freshman orientation leader, at least from her leader perspective, she thought it was just most helpful for the students to go to as many activities as they can, right? Like, I think she led a group to go thrifting in Capitol Hill, and all they did was chat and look. Nobody bought anything, but it didn't really matter because they were all walking in a group of 25 down the walkway, and that's how you bond. So I think orientation was just really helpful to meet people who are all coming in at the same time and to share those experiences.
And as I hinted, you know, since we are finally pretty post-COVID, hopefully, and hopefully no other major pandemics, we are returning to offering an in-person summer orientation program for both students and families, as well as kind of having that big fall welcome like Cindy was talking about. So there are 3 2-day sessions offered over the summer, excuse me, in July. Again, for students and families, we'll have the students spend the night in the residence hall, so they get a little taste of that, which I think is one of the big anxiety things for them. So this hope, you know, just for one night, sharing a room with somebody you don't know is a good way to test that. It's also a good way to see what can actually fit in that room, because you can't bring everything that you own when you come in the fall. And then we'll continue to offer virtual sessions as well for folks. We know not everybody will be able to make it in July for 2 days. So, but thanks, Dan, for the plug. We encourage folks to join in that as well. And like I said, there'll be sessions for family members. Some we might do a couple of sessions, students and families together, but we will separate you and start that separation process so you can get your questions answered as well. And when the move-in happens, Cindy's right, it's kind of, we do a few things together on that move-in day, and then we ask families to depart, and the rest of fall welcome is really just focused on the students' transition around some of their academic pieces and really getting to know the city a little bit, and getting to know one another and making as many connections as they can. It takes a while for that transition to feel okay. It's a big deal. It's a big transition, and they're used to being with people they know, and all of a sudden they're with probably no one they know. So we spend a lot of time trying to get them connected to as many fun things as possible so that they can feel at home. So
There is one thing, I think there might have been a question, what do you need to bring, or, I think the dorm rooms was 180 square feet for a double. And so my advice would be just bring the minimum. Seattle's the headquarter of Amazon. Anything that they forgot or they need, you can probably order it in the morning and it will get to the front desk at night. There were some things that we brought, like Caitlin actually made us bring it home because there just wasn't enough closet room and so forth. So I would say you start off with less is more and then see what they need. So you don't have to bring all that stuff with you or spend extra money on, organizers that frankly, they're never going to use.
sorry, I'm typing a response. Question, how have your students' job prospects improved by being in Seattle? Do you think they have? Has it been a place where they've been able to find some employment, maybe off campus?
Absolutely. Julia had an internship with Amazon, or Starbucks, excuse me. She networked, she found that, she worked at a cookie shop for a short period of time. She just wanted some cash. So yes, there was tremendous opportunities, and she availed herself to the networks from Seattle U to do that corporate internship, which was really good for her.
Yeah, so Caitlin's looking at, because she's nonprofit, she's looking at government and nonprofit internships or jobs for the summer. And surprisingly, there's actually quite a number of opportunities that's available, particularly with city and local government for anyone who's interested in policy or community development. So I think because it is a large city, there's just a lot of services and organizations that are out there. And your advisor can usually connect you with folks, particularly within your major, that's relevant to what you think you're going to study.
Yeah.
Oh, go ahead, Craig.
No, I was say that's my understanding as well. The Parker hasn't had an internship yet. In kinesiology, I think he's looking to do one during probably next year at some point, and his advisor's already talking to him about potential opportunities. So
yeah, I mean, that is an advantage, I think, of being where we are. There are all sorts of opportunities for internships, part-time jobs, anything like that. We typically don't have first-year students having cars on campus. Can you talk about how your students get around the city? Because we want them to not just be on campus.
Orcas Pass. Yep. I mean, for those that are not from Seattle, we're not, but that was one of the things that we were told about very early on. It's cheap for students. I don't think it was free, but it was almost free. It was, and it gets them anywhere. I mean, they can jump on the buses, they can jump on the light rail, and get around. Which, by the way, that light rail is fantastic. I was just in Seattle over the weekend for the admitted students weekend, and jumped on the light rail from the airport got out there, stayed at the Silver Cloud next to the university and went back. My total expense, including the fact that I didn't need to park a car and all the other things that you otherwise have to do if you rent a car, was $6. So it's great, and all the kids are doing that, and so they're jumping on and say, well, let's go down to Pikes Market or whatever, and they're jumping on a bus or on the rail and going down doing these things. So it's very simple.
Students really don't want a car in Seattle unless there's a need. We didn't let our son have one because,
I don't want a car in Seattle.
no, it's expensive to park even on campus. And then if you leave campus with the car, it's expensive to park if you can find a decent spot. Now, some students, obviously we have students who commute, or some students who may have a real need for a car in their first year for some other sort of family or job commitments. And there is an exemption process that students can go through to be able to park on campus as a first year student, but as a matter of course, no. Last question, as I see we're hitting time here. Would your kids describe their peers as mostly political or apolitical?
Interesting.
No, that's a really interesting question. I think from what I've seen, I think it depends on your student. I think, for example, Caitlin is a policy major, so most of her friends have some political views and leanings about how policy should be made, who should be included, and so forth. But I think the good thing though is that there's an openness on campus that I feel. It doesn't really matter what your political leanings is. The idea is to encourage people to speak up, right? So there have been demonstrations, there have been some protests on campus, there have been, letters signed and so forth for a variety of initiatives. But I guess what I'm trying to say is, I think if you do have some viewpoints, I think it's very easy to find like-minded peers. And even when they're not like-minded, they tend to be very open and respectful of differences in opinions.
Right. Any last words of wisdom from you veteran parents for folks? Anything you want to share that we haven't touched on? As you think back to when your student was in this time of trying to figure out where to go and what was important for you to know?
For me, as a bit of an extrovert, I had to sort of be patient in this transition for Julia to let her tell me what she wanted me to hear, and her mom, who she communicates with even more so. So for me, as her parent, it was just sort of patience. This was part of her transition, her adulting experience, and so pressing her to know all the details of her life wasn't necessarily productive. On the other hand, if I found that just when we were together, especially in the times that we were together in person, if I just didn't say anything, sometimes things would come out, and she would share these amazing sort of insightful things. I mean, I mentioned, her freshman year when she got her social justice button punched. Just to hear her describe that experience was really just wonderful to hear, and it was kind of affirmed for us why we made a family decision that this was the best place for her. To something that Cindy said, there you will find somebody that agrees with you or thinks what you do if you work hard enough. At Seattle U, one of Julia's roommates and best friends was a nursing student, and she's a runner on the track team and the cross country team, and not political at all. Her life is in a different place. Julia is, but they are very close, and so that was sort of part of her adulting experience as well.
I think you just need to, I think the hardest part for us was you need to know when to let go, and to not ask those questions. let them tell you what is happening. And just because they're gone doesn't, change anything. And we still know if there's something wrong, you just know there's something wrong, but they'll come and they'll tell you, and they'll ask you, do you want to solve this problem with me? And you have to decide, right? Like, is that the right thing to do? Or is this something they need to figure that out?
Yeah, for those of you that, I mean, if this is your first child that's heading out into the college world and such, I know for us, I will share something that Lori and I were talking about, when I was on campus a number of days ago, and that was, we went through this period with Parker where he was doing what is referred to as spoiling the nest, and I'd never even heard of that. I didn't even know that was a thing. But before he left for school, sometime around the end of his senior year, he apparently knew everything about how the world works, and we knew nothing. I mean, just nothing. And he was adamant and disagreeable at times and couldn't wait to get out. And it's amazing how a few months into being on campus and away from us, how smart we became, and how he would contact us and actually ask questions and was interested to talk to us and get our opinions on things. And it really changed things. And I'm being somewhat facetious about this, but it's a real thing. We had to look it up and realize, you know what? It's a natural part of him accepting the fact that he's going to be moving on into an independent type thing and away from us and dealing with that. And, and it was all, I mean, it's a positive thing, but it was a little surprising getting to the end of his high school. And so for those of you that may start to see this as your child gets closer to leaving and going off to college, look it up. It's a real thing, and you're ready for it. And, be a part of it and be there for your child. I don't know. We've had such a wonderful 2 years of his experience and sharing that with him. And I think Seattle U has been a good part of that.
We will talk about that during summer orientation, Craig.
Okay.
Nesting the nest. I laugh because I remember experiencing it as well. And I work in higher ed. Well, I'm noticing our time. I want to thank our 3 veteran parents for sharing their wisdom. And I want to thank all of you who are on the webinar for asking your questions. We hope that this is the place that you will join the Red Hawk family as well as your student. If you have other questions, I hope you have your admissions contact, but you can reach out to me. My office is actually here for you as a family member. Just email parents@seattleu.edu, and we hope to see you in July or in September. Take care and have a good evening, everyone. Thank you so much.